Well, welcome to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. I am your host and resource for self-care, connections, and collaborations. And today we are going to unleash your creativity with Ashton Rodenhiser. Ashton is the founder of Mind's Eye Creative Consulting and brings ideas to life through graphic recording and facilitation. She's a silent illustrator who transforms complex concepts into a visual language. She has enhanced over 2,500 presentations for everyone from nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies. And now she's on a mission to teach students with the power of doodling as a tool for thinking and learning. So let's welcome Ashton Rodenhiser. Let's see, there we go. Sorry, that's one of them tongue-tied days. Ashton, thank you for joining me.
No problem. I always say, if that's the worst thing that's going to happen today, then it's a good day, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So can you tell us, how did you discover the power of visual learning and graphic recording?
Oh my gosh. So I was like a very creative child, teenager. I never really took any formal art classes, but I've always tried many different things. So name an art medium or an art type, and I've probably tried it. Either I tried it for a day, a week, or a year. But being an artist was never really in the cards. I never thought that I would end up being an artist when I grew up. I think there was just too much negativity around it. The starving artists, people in my family and community, that they'd be making fun of those art kids because they're going to graduate and then what?
Yeah.
So I didn't even consider it as a post-secondary kind of option when I was leaving high school. And I really struggled trying to figure out what it is I want to be when I grew up. And the only thing that I really felt passionate about becoming was a mother. So I actually started going down an education path around early childhood education because when I'm a mom, I can use those skills with my children. I did end up doing that. I do have 3 children between the ages of 5 and 10 currently. But I knew it wasn't something that I wanted to do professionally forever. It was just sort of let's just get some skills, get some knowledge, and do that for a little while. And so I started working at a family center, a nonprofit organization, as an early childhood educator. And then after I was there for about 2 years, I moved into a facilitator role. And I really fell in love with how you can facilitate groups of people, workshops, sessions. And it's not about you being the expert. It's you hearing, listening what they're saying, trying to synthesize for things that you're hearing, feeding it back to them, and just being this sounding board of questions and creating safe spaces for people to have sometimes difficult conversations. And so I really fell in love with that world of facilitation. And after doing that for a little while at that organization, I wanted to move back to where I grew up and wanted to keep doing facilitation work, but I didn't know how I was going to do that. So I started volunteering with a bunch of organizations and made a friend with a facilitator. He just happened to also be a facilitator. And he told me about this one-day workshop that was happening in the city about an hour away and around graphic facilitation. But I had no idea of what that was. So he told me about this one-day workshop about graphic facilitation. I thought that was something I've always been very creative. I really love facilitation. So maybe this is something that would be interesting to me. So yeah, I took that one-day workshop. That was 10 years ago. And after that one-day workshop, I was this is the best thing ever. Being able to help groups of people visualize, not just feeding back as a facilitator in words, but now I can feed back in images. And images are such a powerful way for us to learn, think, and communicate with one another. And I really fell in love with that concept. And yeah, decided after a few years of just sort of playing around with it a little bit, I decided that I wanted to really kind of go all in and create a business and work with people on a professional level doing it.
Yeah, and that is cool because I came from that same era too, where starving artists, and that's not, you can't make a living doing that. But you think about it, we wouldn't have the comics, the cartoons, half the stuff we have if you did not
Oh
have
my gosh.
artists drawing all that stuff. Can
Yeah.
you can you share how doodling can become a powerful tool for learning and thinking?
Yeah, so doodling in itself has gotten a bit of a bad rap. Like a lot of us are doodlers, like in our notebooks, or you're on a call and you're doodling. Doodling does the opposite of what you think it does. So people think, "Oh, I'm doodling, so I'm distracted." It keeps pulling my attention away from something. But it's actually allowing you to stay focused, right? So instead of like your mind wandering off to something else, you're putting pen to paper. A lot of people are very tactile, very kinesthetic in their learning, but you have, like, our society makes us like sit and listen to something or engage with somebody in that way. So it allows us to be able to have our hands moving and doing something while we also are still paying attention. Um, and so doodling can also like allow us to remember that information up to 29% more, like increase our memory
Wow.
retention up to 29% more, right? So that in itself is like if you want to like help yourself remember stuff from a meeting or a webinar or a workshop, like I think doodling can be a beautiful way to be able to help you stay focused and remember more. And the way that I love to teach sketchnoting is just like taking doodles that you might already be doing and just making them more purposeful. So doodling, just making marks or doing whatever that's not connected to the information, like that's
Hmm.
still good for you and still awesome and still helpful. But if you want to actually connect that information and make marks and make notes in a visual way, in a doodly way, then you're just going to like increase that benefit even further. So I usually end up working with and talking with people who, they say, "Oh, I can't draw," or "I can't even draw a straight line," or "Oh, I can't even draw a stick person." And you know what? Those are actually like really beautiful places to start from. In a way, I'd rather work with someone who believes they can draw and allow and give them some tools and some drawing elements that they can use to increase their belief that they can draw and their skill set, rather than working with someone who maybe is a professional artist and then trying to get them to do it. Right?
Yeah.
It's harder because you have to like almost unlearn like more professional techniques to like bring it down to like a more simplistic um, way. And so I really feel like my job also is like to help make things simple, right? How to take
Mhm.
complexity, like complexities all around us. We're like dealing with it. That's what like adds like so much stress to our work and life is complex things, complex relationships, complex work scenarios, complex client issues or whatever, right? So how can you like make it easy to understand, easy to communicate? And one thing that's like really interesting is that I thought going into teaching sketchnoting schools, I thought a lot of people would want to benefit from the learning, right? Because that's one of my favorite things is like I can help you learn. Like if you take a visual note and you do sketchnoting, you're using words, you're using simple little drawings to help you remember it. So from a learning perspective, right, a memory retention perspective, but if, but I actually really love, what I've been getting a lot of feedback from is the communication. People want to learn how to do sketchnoting so they can like take their ideas, put them down on paper, and then help communicate that. Or if they're having a complex conversation or like they're trying to figure something out with somebody else, they can write it down, do a doodle, do a drawing, and then say like, okay, this is how we're doing it. So I kind of went into this about a year ago, um, more from the learning perspective. I thought people would
Mhm.
really want it to learn,
Right.
learn sketchnoting to help them learn. But what I'm more recently, after like talking with some of my customers and some of my students, a lot of them are really loving learning how to sketchnote to help them be better communicators, which I think is pretty cool.
What would you say really sparked your passion for uplifting others' creative spirits?
I think I really love being able to show people like really simple drawing things and allow them, like, win them over really quickly. Whether or not they're hiring me as a professional illustrator to like go into their meeting, Because a lot of times there's people in that room who've never seen me before, or have never seen this kind of thing before. And they're like, what is that random girl in the corner with her big giant piece of paper doing, right? And then, an hour into the meeting, they're like, oh my gosh, look at her. She's like drawing what we're talking about. How cool is that? Right. So I think I win people over by like the cool factor, but then they're experiencing like all the benefits from it. So I get to see people resonate with it. And I think that's why I love like being able to be in a room where I can creatively showcase the information and allow people to connect and resonate with it in the way that they can relate to it. So from that sense, and then from the sense of like when I'm teaching people how to sketch note, they're like, winning people over, like they feel like they can't draw, but they actually can, because it's like reframing what that looks like. And I really believe that everybody has a creative element to them, but at some point in their life were told, or there was a belief put into them that they were not creative, right? So it actually drives me a little crazy when people say I'm not creative, and I'm like, that's ridiculous, because everybody is. It's just unfortunately we have these beliefs, and if you don't choose to rewrite them, right,
Right.
or choose to look at our relationship with something, it's just a word, right?
Yep.
We express creativity all the time, but there's something like weird about that label. And like, don't even get me started on the artist label, right? Because people are like, I'm not an artist, right? But people like at some point in their life, usually like, middle school, high school, there's like something shifts for them that they were either told by a peer, by a teacher, by a parent, somebody, or had some sort of experience. Could have been the slightest, tiniest experience that told them that they were not creative. And mine was in grade 4, so I'd been like 9 years old when my teacher told me I was painting wrong. I was holding my paintbrush wrong. And in my little like 9-year-old mind, I have that memory. And I remember thinking, I can't paint. I can't do this. Right. And luckily I still did things, but it definitely had I just always had that in the back of my mind as like, so I don't even think it's like imposter syndrome. It's just these like little stories and like little beliefs that we have that unfortunately are like more imposed upon us. And then
Sure.
we believe them to be true for ourselves, which is just not the case.
Yeah. It's what you heard and it's how you perceived it. And then it kind of sticks with you. I think we all go through that with a
Yeah.
number of things in life. And it's kind of funny. And it's nice when you can at least identify where it came from and say, yeah, okay, not true.
Yeah.
But can you tell us about a time when doodling helped you solve a complex problem? Because I know you said you're good at making things simple. How do you use that to?
Oh my gosh. I think I just do it every day. No, or like mostly at least once a week for sure. I always like, I think I've just trained myself. Like if I have an issue or a problem, that's what I'll go to. Like I have pens, like I'm just surrounded, obviously, like in a studio full of like sticky notes and pens and things, and
Uh-huh.
blank wall space is like really important to me. So like I think I've just trained myself to go to a piece of paper before I go to a computer. Right. And
Okay.
it does take a bit of training to do that. But like it is like most of us think in pictures, right? And that's why I think like doodling also is like this beautiful like transition for us to be able to communicate for ourselves, right? So I think it's just like really about taking the pen and the paper that you have. It doesn't have anything fancy. And that's one thing I also love about it, is that it's very like low barrier to entry. Everyone has a pen and paper around. You don't need anything special. You don't need special supplies. You don't need anything wild and crazy, right? So, I'm sure I could tell like millions of like work stories of places and things that I've been in, that I've like helped groups move through like challenging situations to be able to come out onto the other side. But I think it's just really like personally for myself, it's very just about putting pen to paper to help me. Like right now, I'm going into, I know this is like being released in January, but we're recording it before January. So I am like, newsflash, sorry. So I am doing 2024 plans right now. Right. So I've been like putting sticky notes on my wall. What do I want to do? How do I, and I love a sticky note because you can move them around. They're not permanent and you can get rid of them. Right. And I love
Right.
like doodling as a communication and thinking tool for ourselves, because like they don't have to be permanent. Whereas if you say like a drawing or artwork, you feel like it has to be right. It's there more focus on the product. Whereas a doodle is like, you can just throw it away. You can just like get a new one or whatever.
As I say, so how does your approach like break down the complex ideas into easily understandable visuals? Because I know even with I'm just taking notes, I think it makes sense for me at the time, but I can go back and look at that notepad later and I'm like, yeah, okay, not even sure what I was writing. And it just,
Right.
it seems challenging to be able to put it into a visual that would, how do you break that
Yeah.
down?
So words are always going to be still very important. Like I'm going to just talk about like note taking here for a second. Visual note taking or sketch noting, right? Where the words and the content are always going to still be extremely important. It's just about how we listen to that information, right? Whereas a lot of traditional note taking, unfortunately, we listen, we write down words, right?
Okay.
There's this whole chunk in between, which is the thinking and the understanding, the comprehension, the synthesization, all those buzzy words, right? Traditional note taking, you hear the word, you write it down. You hear the word, you write it down. And you're just writing words, right? Whereas visual note taking makes you just pause for a second and think about what you heard in real time, right? So you hear, they just said something, you're thinking about it. You're also kind of like listening to that's like the hardest part, is you're also still listening, right? You're listening,
Right.
you're thinking, you're listening, you're thinking all at the same time, but you're not writing anything right away, potentially, right? Or you're writing one word, or you're writing a sentence instead of like everything they just said, right? Someone might have went on and on and on for 5 minutes, but the question you're asking yourself is what's the point here? What is it that they're trying to tell me? In amongst all the words they just said, what are they trying to tell me? What is the lesson? What is the idea? What is the action? Right? So you're being extremely critical of everything that person is saying. And people tend to repeat themselves, right? When they are trying to explain something, right? So if you're in a meeting in particular, people just say the same thing like 3 times. So you don't have to write it down 3 times. They're
No.
just like, oh, they said it 3 times. It's probably pretty important, right? So it sometimes can be a bit of a guessing game. And it can also be depending on the situation you're in. A meeting is different than like a formal presentation, which is different than a workshop, which is, you know what I mean? So, but you're listening, you're trying to understand. So you're still writing down words, but they're potentially shorter chunks of information. Okay? So you still got your
Okay.
information, still extremely important. But then what you can do is start incorporating drawing elements, right? I think when people hear visual note taking or sketch noting, they just automatically, it's like an all or nothing. It's like, oh, well, I have to draw everything. It's like, no. Like sometimes it can be like 99% words and 1% drawings, 95% words, 5% drawings, right? As you're starting to kind of like develop this new way of thinking and note taking, right? So in that 1% or 5%, what you can do is start adding in what I call a drawing elements, the elements of visual note taking. And the first thing that I teach people is how to draw a line. Right? I think
Yep.
everybody,
Yep.
it might not be a straight line, but you can draw a line. Okay.
Right.
A line can help you connect information. It's all still about the information, right? So a line can help connect information, can help separate information, can highlight information or spark it. There's one more that's eluding me. I'll come back to it, I'm sure. But you can use something as simple as a line to show direction or flow is the last one, right? They
Okay.
said this, then they said this, then they said this, and you're using a line to connect those pieces of information. Or they said this one really random thing, I don't know what to do with it. Let's put 2 little lines around it, section it off on a different part of the page because I don't know what to do with that yet, right? It was an off comment. Maybe I even just scratch it out, whatever it is, right? So then you take a line, you enclose that line, now you have a container, right? A container allows you to elevate information, right? It could be like a little subheading or like a subtitle. It could emphasize something, and it can group information, right? So you can use something like, if you just use lines and containers, like, you'd be good. Like, you don't even have to do anything else. You can start adding in lots of other things.
It sounds like flowcharts I used to do when I wrote computer programs.
Yeah, well, definitely you can use that as inspiration, like pull in other ways that maybe you've used this before. Like, when I talk about this, people go, oh, it's like a mind map. Because mind mapping became very popularized at one point. It's a very specific way of collecting information. It's like a web. If you don't know what a mind map is, you have your idea in the middle, and then you've got your ideas on the outside in little containers with lines, and then it looks like a little spider web, right? But it's a very specific way of capturing, right? And honestly, most times I never find myself in situations where a mind map is the right way to collect that information. It's just like a little bit too structured for me because I'm like super free flowing, So I'm like, I just want a blank page.
It's going to be challenging to work with people that are more structured, or like me, that gets too much in their head.
Right. But if you are more structured, then that's okay. You can embrace that going into your visual note. Like, you can separate sections off in your page beforehand. Like, you do whatever you need to do to help you give yourself a little bit of structure. But for me, I like total freedom. I want to be able to capture something, leave some space around it so that if 10 minutes later that person says something that relates to it, I can put it back. I can put it with the other information it belongs with. So it's really about being more spatial when we're capturing information. And imagine just having a big giant piece of paper and having your information kind of spread all through it. And now it allows you to make those connections. Then you can get into color and drawing people, which isn't scary, and building a visual vocabulary where you have icons that can relate to certain icons. Like, let's say a magnifying glass can represent analyzing and focus and zooming in on something, and having start with these icons, and then you can build into visual metaphors, right? Like, how do we an image that is or a series of or multiple images coming together that represents something more complex. Like, how do you draw resiliency? How do you draw collaboration? How do you draw some of these more complicated ideas? And sometimes it's still you still might end up leaning heavily on the words, and that's okay, right? But it's just slowly over time, if this is something that you want to try, just adding in little visual elements as you kind of build your skill set.
That is so cool. I know we have a lot more to discuss, because I know we need to, let people know and stuff too about how you can help them, how they can do that. But we do need to take a quick break from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat. But the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Relief for PTSD, anxiety, pain, insomnia, and many other ailments. Introducing Vibe, the world's only pocket PEMF device. You place it in your pocket while cooking, cleaning, relaxing, watching TV, sitting at your computer, reading, or walking. Self-contained standalone device. No drugs. No other phone or Bluetooth connections required. No monthly subscription fees. No apps to download. No Bozone. The future of medicine is in the frequencies. Come join the revolution.
Hello, my name is Peter. I'm a Dharma Master. I teach Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy. What kind of Qigong do we teach? Well, it helps you to get your mind into your body and your breath very quickly. We really start off with quite quick movements to help cater for the busy Western mind, coming into stretching out the meridians, waking up the chakra system and the danjons, coming into Jigan meditation, which helps you to really focus on the energy in and around your body, bringing you into that beautiful calm state where you can sit and meditate really easily, whereas maybe before you found it really difficult. So Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy will help you get more in touch with yourself.
And we're back. So, we talked about the doodling and how a lot of times it got stifled. What advice do you have, for people that are curious about it, or how, who believe that they're not creative or artistic enough to doodle or draw?
Yeah, I think trying to like reclaim that for yourself, and that's not easy to do, right? Because it is, like I mentioned earlier, kind of you have to retrain and rewire your brain to believe that you are, right? So, I could tell you that you are, but unless you believe it for yourself, it's not gonna happen, right? So I think it's like a spirit of openness and being open to the idea that you do have some creativity in you and that you can express it in the way that feels right for you. And that could be doodling and drawing, which is like my jam, or it could be music, it could be dance, it could be humor, it could be storytelling. I'm even like wrestling with something that I've struggled with a lot of my life in this weird relationship that I have to sports, because I've always felt like sports and art were like two opposing sides, but there's actually a lot of beauty in creativity in sports. And then what does that look like, right? So anyways, I think just being open to it and seeing what might resonate with you. And it might take like a long time to find that thing that feels good to you from a creative outlet perspective. And yeah, like I actually just sort of, I kind of happened upon this, right? But I was open to it.
Right.
And I actually really embrace some of my traits that might not be very desirable when it comes to this work and this way of being and practicing. One of them being I'm actually very impatient, which makes visual note-taking and sketchnoting and working as a professional live illustrator is actually a good thing, because you have a time limit. And I actually love the time limit. Most people hate it. Most people don't like, we've got an hour or there's an hour presentation. I have to do it and I have to be done, right? You don't have to be done. You can always work on it later or whatever. And I know some people who do sketchnoting and they never do it live. They make their notes, they go away, they create a visual that will help them learn and engage with however they want to do it, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't always have to be live, but when I'm doing it live, I actually really love the time constraint, because I've got frustrated with art mediums. It just took forever. It's like, I don't want to wait for the paint to dry to put on more paint. It drives me nuts. So I think it's just like a matter of some of these qualities are characteristics about ourselves that might be perceived as negative, like being kind of impatient. It's like, how do we flip that around and make that work for us? And how can we use that as a benefit and not look at it as a negative? Yeah.
And now, I've seen some of the other things that you're on. So just to be clear, when you were doing this, like for corporate and for other places or businesses, you go in there like it's a presentation and you just sit down and start drawing, but a lot of times you have no idea what the presentation is even about.
Yeah, correct.
How do you,
Yeah.
that to me, that is amazing. How do you just go into something you have no idea and just start?
Yeah. So I should preface that, like, I might know something about the industry. I don't know what they're going to say, but if it's tech or if it's some sort of particular tech thing, I'll be like, oh, I should know what this tech thing is, right? And usually, because I find myself in these situations, I find myself into them more and more, right? So like I did my first cybersecurity event a couple years ago, and now I do that all the time, right? So you kind of just, sometimes I'll find myself in like a very obscure industry I've never worked in before, but that's not as common. Usually, like, it's that first time you got to kind of get the lay of the land, and then the next one. When you do it for so long, you can just lean in on like, oh, and there's like a lot of overlaps in industries too, right? And a lot of them talk about the same stuff. I'm just going to say it.
We all say the same stuff. We just have a different way of saying it or a different perception.
Exactly. Yeah. I've joked around that if everybody could just get along, I wouldn't have a job. Because that seems to be such a popular topic. It's like, how can we just collaborate and get along better? Sometimes, not as often anymore, but like I would just ask the client, like, send me an article, send me a YouTube video, send me something that I can learn, but I don't want to know what the presenter is going to say particularly.
Okay.
But I might do like a little research. If it's something that I haven't captured before, I might look up some icons that maybe I could draw, like, but you still don't really know, So, and I actually prefer to not know what a presenter is going to say, because I really want to be in the moment. Like, being in the moment is like part of the process and the creative process of it. And if I get too much information, if they send me slide decks and they send me abstracts and they send me all this stuff, and I read it, I just end up freaking myself out, because I'm like, I have no idea what they're going to talk about. This sounds so complicated.
Wow.
And I'm in the moment, but I'm thinking, instead of hearing what they're saying, I'm thinking about what I think they're saying based on my preconceived notion of the research and the reading that I did ahead of time. So even though there is an element of risk, it helps me be more present in the moment, because you have, like, your brain is just like on fire. And like at the end of a work day, when I'm doing this, I'm just like, I can't even put two sentences together because my brain is just so full, because you can't let your mind wander at all. Right. So,
and that brings up another good point, though. I mean, what if so you've done your research, you have an event you're going to show up to and do this. Have you ever just had kind of a block or just not really been in the mood? I mean, how do you get yourself to just
you kind of just have to do something. Like, I find if you allow yourself to get too overwhelmed, then you'll just fall apart. So I just try not to let myself get there. I just start drawing stuff. Like, even if it doesn't even like really connect to it, like if it's a finance talk, I'll just start drawing like money bags or like dollar signs. Like, I need to be doing something while I'm still listening. Right. If I'm standing there for too long, frozen, then that's just going to perpetuate that feeling. But if I just keep drawing stuff, keep writing things, someone says something, they say 3 times, I put 3 little lines underneath of it. People might not pick up on those little things, but I know, like there's lines here because it was emphasized too much, not too much, but a couple times,
Well, it's like your own stenography.
Yeah. So, there's certainly been, the only times that I've ever done it, that I've really, really struggled, is like when I was physically ill. I did an event in New York a few years ago, and they never hired me back, and no wonder, because I was so sick. I was so sick. Like, I had the flu. I was so ill, but I was there and I had to do it. And it was like tax planning, and it was so dry. It was so hard.
Taxes are pretty dry and boring.
It was so hard, and I was so unwell. And they were like, so I think I actually did pretty good on the drawings, considering how unwell I felt. And then at the end of the day, they're like, come out for drinks with us. And I'm like, no. And I was trying not to let them know that I wasn't well. And I was like, I'm just really not feeling well. I'm going to go back to my Airbnb. And they're like, okay. So it's only been like a handful of times like that I'm like, you can't predict that you're going to be unwell, right, when you get there. So especially when I used to travel a lot, all the time for these types of jobs, right? So lucky for COVID, I was able to move a lot online. So I get to work with people online mostly now. And I do end up doing more like in person, but more local within a drive.
Okay.
I would love to be able to pick and choose maybe where I travel to, but
Sure.
haven't done it too much in the last couple of years. But yeah, it's definitely, it definitely, there is an element of risk in it. But I think that's kind of what kind of makes it fun. And if you're in a situation, like you're not a walking dictionary, so you're going to spell stuff wrong, and you're not you're not an expert in whatever they're talking about. So sometimes, especially when I was doing a lot of in-person stuff, I would ask for a volunteer. They'd be like my Claire. They'd be like my running around person. And, because sometimes I can't even go pee. So I'm like, stand here and do this while I go pee. And I would ask someone like, who could I talk to? Is it a volunteer, somebody else, that if I have a question about the content, they can answer a question about the content, right? Usually at events, like the speakers are so fancy that you don't get a chance to ask them a question, but could I ask somebody a question? About what and there's been very few times where I've had to do that, but it has been helpful. If hey, so sometimes maybe I won't capture something, I'll write it on a sticky note and put it where I think it's going to go, and then be able to clarify, what does that acronym stand for that everybody knows, but I don't, or whatever.
Yeah. And if you do anything with military, we're really good at acronyms. We can
Everyone
say stuff
loves an acronym.
If they're not military, it's like, oh, right. I was like, okay.
Exactly.
So I got to slow down and tell you what that acronym's for.
Yeah, exactly. So being able to, and especially when I'm in situations where it's like a meeting and there's lots of people, someone who comes up on break, I can be like, can you tell me about this? And then people want to help. People are so lovely and they want to help you. So, I think those first few years I'd be really embarrassed, but now I'm just like, it doesn't matter because people just want to be helpful. Yeah.
Do you happen to have any of the examples around you? I know you can see some of the doodles off to the side behind you.
I've got my this is a very my face little poster here. I do have my book I can show you because it has lots of drawings in it as well. My Beginner's Guide to Sketchnoting. So that's a book that I released a couple of months ago, and it's got all these little cheat sheets in it too for little drawings that you can kind of do and get started with as well, which is really fun. And I actually, in the back of the book, I put a drawing my very first drawing that I ever did, and then one that I did recently in the timing of publishing this book. So that might be interesting to show. So one of the first ones I ever did.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then another one, a Brene Brown presentation, or a little summary of her book, right? So you can kind of see, this is all right. The first one's okay, but the difference in that in 10 years, right?
Oh yeah. You can definitely see the difference, but that's still cool to be able to do that and follow it.
Yeah.
So you released the book then to help people kind of get started in this and in doodling, and is that on your Sketchnote school?
Yeah, it's on sketchnote.school website. And it was really about a lot of the stuff that I've already said, right? About why I created it, the benefit and the values, and how to get started, and, wanting people to be able to start doing it. One thing that I keep encountering is people saying I tried to do this, but then I got stuck, or I didn't know. And then, so I've had some nice feedback from people, from those folks, that they tried it, but they couldn't get it. There was something missing. And I felt I wanted to put this book together from that perspective of really trying to handhold people along the way. And it's very cheerleadery. I got little, you got this, all through it. And when I was putting the book together, I was inspired by a book that I read called Write Useful Books by Rob Fitzpatrick. And he talks about when you want to write a useful book, like a book that someone like actually learns something, because in nonfiction, a lot of times they're idea books. They're not action books, right? Get to the good stuff as quickly as possible. So it was actually the introduction of the book that was the hardest to write, because I wanted to get to the good, like the actual, like how to sketch note as quickly as possible. And that was sort of my like process going into it. How do I get people putting pen to paper as quickly as possible and feeling like they're gaining success and feeling like they can do it throughout the book? By the time you're done, you're like, I can do this. It's not that hard, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome. So how do you incorporate self-care into your busy life, and what role does doodling play in it?
Yeah. So, yeah, my self-care journey, and I call it doing nothing time, is definitely been one that I've struggled with and wrestled with, because when you do something you love, you want to just do it like all the time. But when you run like a creative business and you have to be creative, like 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning, you better be creative. To do this event all day, like you have to be creative, like on a moment's notice. And was recently sort of reflecting on that and how I've really kind of depleted my creative energy and just like give it away to everybody else. Like, yeah, okay, I'm like receiving money, running a business, and that's like important to me. Being able to do it is very important to me, and I still really love doing it. But it's the how can I also try to regain or retain some of the creative energy left for myself at the end of the day? So I haven't quite figured that out yet, but I do spend a lot of time in nature. We have a lot of land here. We got a dog, so I walk the dog, and I like listen to my body, like especially if it's an event, if I'm not doing like an event one day, or if I have like flexibility on a day, I just listen to my body. If it's like at 10 in the morning, after I've only been at the computer for an hour, my body's telling me to go for a walk, I go for a walk then. If it's at 2 o'clock, I go then. If it's at 6 o'clock, I go then, so I try to listen to what my body's telling me, and movement is more important to me than I think ever before, because like I have struggled with back issues, so I'm really trying like work on that. Like before I hopped on this call, I was like doing my exercises. My physiotherapist would be very proud of me.
Yeah.
I have a little exercise bike in my studio. Even if I just go on it for like 5 minutes, that like makes me feel good. So I mostly like do it in like little small chunks of time, instead of like blocking off big sweeping times, right? And like I typically have, unless I'm doing an event, a shorter work day, because I like to be able to be off mostly when my kids get home off the bus, so I can be really present for them. That's really important to me. And just being playful with them and hanging out. Like they're pretty cool people, so I like hanging out with them. And being there for them. So yeah, it's something that I'm definitely, I want to be able to be creative in a different way and like explore what that looks like for me. And I go through seasons of like consuming and not consuming. So I might listen to like 20 podcast episodes in like a week, and then I don't listen to anything for a month. Right. So like I have to also be mindful about how much consuming I'm doing. Because if you're always in consuming mode, you can't put any of that, what you learn, into action. Right. So I also feel like that's part of my learning, my self-care for myself is like, like I love like business books and self-care books and like mindful book, like mindset and like all that stuff. But I do find there is a tipping point when it almost like becomes not self-care anymore. And it becomes more like just I'm consuming. And it's like, yeah, you're just like in it, just consume. And then you're getting all these ideas from all these people and you're like, I don't even know what to do anymore. Do I need
Then you're on
bread?
overload. Where do I
Bread? I
start?
don't know.
But that's good. I mean, at least you can listen to your body and you recognize that. Do you ever doodle then for just for yourself and not for business?
I definitely like draw and do things, but it's kind of a different vibe. Like I do it in a different way. Because I think just trying to like also build my skills that then I can like take it into. So it might be a matter of like putting up a piece of paper and seeing how fast I can draw something, like little challenges for myself. You know, from a speed perspective, or like how would I draw this one thing 10 different ways so that I have that. So I'm not just drawing the same stuff over and over again. So my own kind of like personal growth and learning for that, but I definitely could spend more time and see and try to see the value. You know, and and because I have my sketchnote school now, I have like an online community, like that's what's really lighting me up a lot these days too, is like when people post like the very first sketchnote they've ever done, I get to be in there and celebrate with them and be excited for them and be able to be on calls and stuff. But I need to be in like a good headspace to be able to show up for people in that way as well. So on a random note, I'm learning how to play the bagpipes. So that's sort of like my creative outlet currently, is more about trying to learn how to play the bagpipes.
That's cool. That's got to be a challenge though.
I've learned a lot of instruments and it's quite a beast. I'm not going to lie. It's quite a beast. And my 10-year-old and I are doing it together. And I told her, I was like, if you learn how to play this instrument, you can do anything. I don't think she quite understands it, but I was like trying to explain to her, like, out of all these different instruments I've learned, like, I don't know, maybe it's as like, because I'm learning it as an adult, maybe that's a whole other thing. I'm not sure, but it's a beast of an instrument, man. So,
I've seen them. Yeah. I had enough trouble trying to blow a trumpet when I tried to blow somebody's trumpet from Marching Band. I was like, how do y'all do this? I may be able to talk, but I don't have the wind capacity in me for that.
I need to be practicing, because like I'm in the transition space of like you learn on the chanter first and then you go to the bagpipes. And I'm in that transition and it's very difficult. So if there's anybody out there who just happens to play the bagpipes, I don't know if there's an emoji for the bagpipes, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sure we could find one. I think there's an emoji pretty much for everything.
Probably. Yeah.
So what is the best way for people to connect with you and contact you? The Sketchnote school, or?
Yeah, if this sounds like something you might want to like play around with, for sure. Sketchnote school is all things learning how to sketchnote or create visual notes. So I've got a free weekly newsletter, and I have like a little 15-minute video, like draw your first sketchnote, that walks you through some of these principles. I've got my book on there. I got my community. It's all a good time. And and then Mind's Eye Creative is like where my professional portfolio is held. Like, so folks who are looking to work with me as like a professional to come in and do their conference or their meeting or what have you, that's a good way to connect with me on there as well. Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah. So what kind of results? I mean, trying to put this into words now. See, we're talking about pictures. We're not talking about words. We're talking about pictures now. It just amazes me that how you do that and you can jump into doing that. I mean, what's been some of your feedback or some of your accomplishments? You got any kind of stories to share with us of stuff of what that's done for people by having you there?
Yeah, I think for me, the moments that stick out the most for me is when people have come up to me and told me how it impacted them. You know, like I had this guy, this was years ago now, and he came up to me and he looked like he was well beyond retirement age. And he's like, I've worked at this company for 40 years and no one's asked me how I felt before. Right. And then when you're in situations like that, where you're allowing and you are trying to help someone have a voice, especially someone who feels unseen, feels unheard, especially for a long time, like those those experiences, especially that I had like early on, like really rooted me in like the honor it is for me to try to help them have a voice. So I really hold, like, especially when I'm in those situations, I hold those with like a lot of reverence because it is such an honoring place to be in, right? And I want to make sure that I am uplifting their voice as best I can, right? So it's like this very delicate balance of making sure that I help them feel heard. And sometimes I have to have conversations with clients when we're doing those types of things that I'm like, I'm going to write what people say, take it or leave it. I'm not going to edit people. I cannot edit. I cannot, like,
Right.
ethically, I cannot edit people. They're going to say something and I'm going to write it down. Right. And I do find myself in situations where people are having very heartfelt, very emotional, very intense, like very delicate, difficult conversations. Right. So when I'm in those situations in particularly, it's very honoring to be there. So those are the ones that always like stick out for me as like when they come up to me and they say things like, or how they reflect on it during the event and things like that. It makes me like understand the power of that even more. And like how it's my part of my job there is to help bridge the human connections there, right? And how people see themselves in the bigger picture of whatever this issue is that they're talking about. And yeah, that's just a very honoring place to be in, for
So it's
sure.
got to be an amazing feeling. And I love that you're an advocate for doodlers. Like I said, we all came from that time frame, where it's like, there's no, nothing to that. We have a couple of minutes left before we
Sure.
end today.
Yeah.
So what message would you like for everybody to get from this most of all?
Yeah, I guess, we'd lean back in on the creativity piece, like explore what that means to you, right? And this is Mindful Mondays, and like how can you use creativity in the way that works well for you to use that in your mindfulness practices or your self-care practices. I was listening to a podcast as I was driving earlier today, and I was very excited when he gave a few things like, if you're not going to do anything, at least do these 3 things. And one of them was journaling, right? And I think sometimes because a lot of us think in pictures, like when we're journaling and we're writing things down, like you could draw a picture, right? And draw a picture about how you're feeling about something. Just elicits a whole different creative energy. And like if you haven't drawn anything for a long time, but you'd like to, like hopefully if this is inspiring to you and you're like, oh, maybe I will try to draw, like just know that like you're probably not going to like it. Like you're going to be like, oh, this drawing is awful. And like, that's actually okay. Like sometimes the drawings have to be awful. Like you might not like them. They might look bad. And that's like, that makes sense because you haven't done it in a long time. And sometimes like that's where the beauty is and how like unperfect it is. Right. So hopefully that, is encouraging to people of trying to reconnect with maybe lost creativity or rekindle something, see what that looks like for you.
Yeah, and I love that idea too, because we always talk about writing in our journal, write down how you feel, but no one ever says draw pictures of how you feel, because sometimes you can't put how you feel into words.
Exactly. We can't find the right word. What does that mean? And like, and that's why I like the word doodle, because you could just like doodle something. It doesn't have to mean anything and you can get
It's
rid
not
of
supposed to be
it.
in a gallery winning awards.
Yeah, you could draw it, like you could doodle in your journal and then like do another one and do another one until it elicits the feeling that you're feeling, right? It doesn't have to, you're not going to get it right the first time of making a mark on your page in that way, right?
Well, I love it. I want to thank you for spending the time to get that across and stuff to people. So, I would say anyone out there, if you've ever doodled, wanted to doodle or art, or anybody that's squashed your creativity, definitely go to her sketchnote.school and check it out or connect with Ashton. because there's someone that's at least someone that's going to believe in you and back you up, you know, which
exactly.
having an open mind and having someone to support you is huge.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us today, Ashton. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I was happy to be here.
Thank you. And everyone, we will see you next week. And remember to catch this recording or any other recording, because we have a whole host of wonderful speakers coming up and ones that we have had. Just go to the Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross on YouTube, and we will see you next week. Have a good day.